But anyway, so they go into Magical Mystery Tour, and the film presents that whole endeavour as being a failure.
Right.
Which, obviously we've covered Magical Mystery Tour in great depth, the whole film and its reception, etc. But the film does make pains to say that it's mostly Paul's vision, Paul's project.
Yeah.
It says something along the lines of the idea was to get in a bus, to drive around and see what happens. Unfortunately, nothing did.
Yeah.
I think it says something like that. And that's the first instance I got where, like, you're talking about a failure in the band's career, and you have, again, squarely placed that with Paul and his vision.
Yeah.
And it might be true, might be accurate, but I think from that point on, the film starts teasing a little bit more of a negative role that Paul plays in certain situations. So, for example, when they talk about Alan Klein coming in to save the day, I think it says something like, when the Apple Corps started losing money, became a real business concern, Alan Klein came along to help. The only dissenting voice in that was Paul, who wanted to bring his own in-laws in.
Yes.
And it's just sort of, I don't know, like sort of undermining, I think, almost like digging comments that kind of undermine Paul's perfectly reasonable rationale for taking his own stand in certain ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, and in that case, and then obviously that comes right through to the end where it is very much stated that Ringo and John and George all flirted with leaving the band, and Paul always pulled them back in, but now it is Paul's turn. His solo album came out and he confirmed that the band has split up.
Yeah.
And it's just presented, I guess, as part of this narrative of him being a bit controlling, a bit perfectionist, and a bit difficult to work with. And then he ultimately made the choice to split the band up, which we now know isn't the case.
Yeah. So I'm not sure whether it was known at all at that point that John had actually left them in September '69.
Yeah.
But it was, oh, don't tell anyone, because we're trying to, like Alan Klein was sort of trying to do them a new record deal.
Yeah.
Don't tell anyone the band split up.
Yeah.
So it may have been that at that point that was what was thought, that, like the actual prevailing wisdom was that Paul was the one who had split it. And actually, I mean, that kind of persisted for quite a few years just because he was the first one to announce it, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly that, yeah. And I think that's, we talked before, but I think that's probably led to what seems to be a big chip on Paul's shoulder that he then bears for a good 20 years after.
Yeah.
If not longer. There's also that bit in the film where the narration talks about Paul being controlling in the Let It Be sessions, and it shows a picture of him pointing. And the implication, I think, is, look, here is Paul giving orders to everyone around him.
Yeah.
But I feel like we have more context for those sessions now, particularly to Get Back, and he's just singing.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I feel like what he's actually pointing at, if anything, is the harmonies that he's imagining in his head as he's singing along to the songs.
Right. Yeah, he might even be sort of air drumming with his fingers or something like that. But it is obviously, he's been like caught halfway through. Yeah, and there's another picture where he sort of appears to be frowning or the others appear to be frowning at him in the studio or something like that. So yeah, that is the narrative it's going with for sure. And yeah, like maybe this is one of the things that led to that public perception. By the way, it's not an entirely unfair public perception.
No, I don't think so.
It's very, known to be fairly perfectionist, and it is known that sort of got the others' backs up at times.
Yeah.
But it's more just that, even up until 2 years ago when Get Back came out, we kind of all thought that Paul was the one who was pissing everyone off in the studio, and now we know it's a lot more.
I think there's definitely a question of, I think we can look at this film released in 1982 and think, oh, that was released at a time when we didn't know better.
Yeah.
And so it's pushing this narrative. But the other way of looking at it is that was released in 1982 before a time when there's been a clear move to sanitize a lot of the drama and the story around like any sort of ill feeling that any of the band members had to each other. So actually, which is correct? I think you could easily argue that actually that might be a more accurate view than what we now know rather than it's ill-informed.